y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jasmine. If you're new here, I like to talk about books, sometimes makeup, and today I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in 2023. Today is January 24th. I know I'm super late, but we're here, we're gonna get into it. I have all the books that I read open on my Goodreads, and I'm just gonna go in order, and then at the end I'll do like my top favorites and the books that were not my favorite. And I honestly think that this is gonna go really quickly. I'm not gonna go into much depth on the books that I read last year. Honestly, last year was probably the worst reading year that I've had just in my memory. Honestly, it was just not good. Every other book that I picked up was just, I don't know, I just couldn't connect with it, or every other book that I picked up, it just felt like it was very difficult to connect with. I wasn't really in a groove like other years where I finished one and I rolled right into the other one. I had a lot of gaps in between my reading, and honestly I think it's just because I had a lot of change going on that year. A lot of changes going on last year with my career, different job training and everything, but honestly just starting the year I just felt like I never really hit that groove, which sucks because that was actually the year that I have had my biggest book goal. For the past few years I have been just putting it around 50, and I always kind of surpass it, and I felt like if I just challenged myself I could do 60. But so last year I tried to make the book goal even greater, and I actually did not even get close at all. My book goal was 60. I read 33 books last year, so not really close, but at least halfway. The first book that I read in 2023 was Dear Dolly, On Love, Life, and Friendship by Dolly Alderton. I gave this book 4 stars. It was written in a question answer sort of way. I really enjoyed it. I did like her memoir a little bit more, which I read in 2022, but this was really good. It had a lot of her humor that I enjoy, and I actually, her newer book, Good Material, I just read that. That was actually the first book that I read this year, and I think I also gave it 4.5 stars as well. So I do like her writing. The next book that I read was Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. I wanted to reread this book, which I reread a lot of books actually last year. I gave this 4 stars, which I'm kind of surprised to see, but maybe that looks like it's from the first time that I read it, which was in 2021. I really like this. I'm pretty sure I meant to give it 5 stars. This is my favorite Sally Rooney. It's about 2 girls and their friendship and kind of just how it grows and changes over time, and it's just my favorite Sally Rooney. The next book that I read was Feeding the Soul, Because It's My Business by Tabitha Brown. Her memoir, I know I have it rated as 4 stars. Usually I don't rate memoirs at all. I really liked it. This is her kind of life story and journey to where she got to up at that point, and I think it has a lot of good nuggets and gems. It's actually a book that my fiance and I started listening to years ago, I think when it first came out, and we were listening to it on an airplane, and I fell asleep and he decided to finish it, and I never finished it. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Love Tabitha, and it's pretty cool because it has like some recipes in it, and you know, every other page, so I really enjoyed that one as well. The next book that I read was Fly Girl, a memoir by Anne Hood. This was a 5-star for me. This is about a woman named Anne who started flying in the golden age of flying, and just really details everything about her experience becoming a flight attendant, and her travels and the expectations that were put in place on flight attendants. Just what years was this? In 1978. So just very different, like just, I mean, so much history that that I personally didn't know. I just saw it randomly in like Barnes and Noble, and I thought it was really interesting and super cool. And I know I didn't mention it. I don't know if I've ever even said it on my channel, but I am a flight attendant. I am not a teacher anymore. I'm a flight attendant, and as I prepared to go to flight attendant training last year, that was one of the books that I had read before I went later in the year. So I thought it was really insightful and just interesting to see how the industry in itself has changed. The next book that I read was Beautiful World, Where Are You? And I gave that 3 stars. I think that I don't remember not liking it that much, but then I also, because this is a reread, so I was rereading both the Sally Rooney's. I know for this one, Beautiful World, Where Are You? I listened to it on audio when it first came out, and I just was not connecting with it. Sometimes the audiobook, it's either I'm in it and I'm like hearing it, well, I'm like really listening and I'm really actively engaging with it, or sometimes it's like I'm very distracted and I'm like, I don't even know what's going on, like worse than what it would be if I was just reading the book. So I wanted to reread it, and the rating that I have is from October 17th, 2021, when I first read it. So I'm thinking that that might not be the true rating. I do think it was probably closer to a 4. I don't know if it was necessarily a 5. I remember liking it a lot more when I reread it, and it was like, oh, I didn't even remember any of that detail. But it follows a lady, I think her name was Alice, and kind of just like her journey through her life in comparison to where she is, some of her friends, one of her friends in particular, and just like dating and all that kind of stuff. Very slice of life, you know, very much just Sally Rooney, not necessarily very plot driven, but more character driven. And I enjoyed it, but I guess it didn't make for the best audiobook experience when I read it. And then I reread The Defining Decade by Meg Jay. I have read this every year since I graduated from college, maybe the year before, so going on 3 years. Yikes. And I rated it 5 stars when I first read it the first time. I have not read it this year, and I don't plan on reading it again. I don't know why, but I feel like it's not that my feelings have changed. I think that it is a good book. I think that for me personally, post-grad, those first years were pretty difficult, kind of figuring out where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And so reading this was very helpful. Now, I don't know, I just don't feel like I need to read it anymore or again. And yeah, I kind of just, I don't want to give it away, and I've read it 2 or 3 times, but I rated it 5 stars. Now that I'm nearing like my mid-20s, I do feel that some of the advice is very good, but I do think that a lot of it is just, for me personally, just growing pains as things change, and just, you know, just allowing yourself to grow and understand yourself. So I wouldn't say that this is not necessary, but I do think that it was good for a certain point in my life, and I read it last year, and I picked it up again, and I thought it was good at that time. The next book that I read was Finley Donovan is Killing It by Ellie Cosimano. I rated this 3 stars. I would, on reflection, I would rate it even like 2. This was, one of those audiobooks where I just was not connecting with it. I thought it was good. I do think that I thought it was pretty funny. I really just didn't connect with a lot of these books last year. But this is about a single mom, Finley, who her husband leaves her for, I'm pretty sure it's like a real estate agent, and she has 2 children. She's a novelist. It's kind of not going that well, and through some funny circumstances, she is hired to do a job that she is not, doesn't have any experience and doesn't want to do, which is basically she's a hitman. And it kind of goes from there. And I believe that this is like a series that may be on its like third or fourth book at this time. I really typically don't get into series just because I haven't found mine that has kept me wanting to come back. But this was a 3-star for me. Next book that I read was The Mastery of Love, A Practical Guide to the Art of Relationship by Miguel Ruiz. I gave this 4 stars, which is really good because it must have been very good when I read it, because I really cannot remember. I really cannot remember what it's about. I think it was kind of like broken down into like 5 or 6 steps. I think this was a very little book. Like I listened to it on audio. I believe it was probably like 3 or 4 hours, not very long, and I gave it 4 stars. I'm so sorry. I feel like, it just was one of those years where I just wasn't really connecting deeply with anything I read. This book that I read that was a 5-star read for me was Know My Name by Chanel Miller. It is an extremely wow. I've been trying to film this one clip for it's the construction, something's in my eye, literally every single time, but memoir, and it does detail and explain what happened to her in her sexual assault. But I also feel like it is so much more than that. I feel like it is so many different things. It is her life story, and yes, it does cover the assault, but it covers her experience as a woman, her identity, her sexuality, really the meaning of who she is in her life before that even happened, and also after, the days leading up to it, kind of the just the experiences of, I don't know, it was very good. I thought it followed the trial, just very much detailed every single emotion that she felt, every sense of anxiety, anger, confusion, that in those emotions of her family, of her longtime boyfriend. It was so good, 5 stars. And probably, I would say, the best book that I read last year. I quickly then took a downhill turn to read The 4 Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. I rated this 2 stars. I think that maybe I enjoyed The Mastery of Love, and that's why I wanted to read The 4 Agreements. I guess I just thought it was not good at all. 2 stars is super low for me. I don't even know if I've ever rated a book that low. I'm assuming that it probably just, maybe I felt like it didn't have any depth or just wasn't good at all. And to be honest, I can't even remember much of what it's about, other than I'm assuming that it just goes into depth on 4 different principles of life, and I guess I thought I would like it after I read the other book that I read from him this year. So moving on, I read Someone We Know by Shari Lapena. Y'all know I really like Shari and her work. I think that she just can put a story together. She can just really spin, a story, and I gave it 3 stars. She's not a 5-star author for me, but she is an author I'm gonna buy from and I'm gonna read from. It's not like I don't have like soaring high expectations. I know it's not gonna be the best thing I ever read, but I know I'm gonna enjoy it, and I did. Well, I just read a review because I just could not remember what this was about. I remember the first part of the book and I can't remember the last part. And anyway, I just remember that it was about a teenage son that had broken into someone's computer, and he found some information that, was top secret in somebody's home, and it basically like all came back to this one woman, and I guess it just wasn't that good. I'm sure that, I read it very quickly, but that was that one. The next one that I read that was a 4-star for me was Carrie Soto Is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have not read all of her books, but I've read the majority, and I honestly think that I would say this is like second to my favorite. I really like Daisy Jones and Six. That was my favorite. This was so good. I actually think I would say this is a 5-star read. I read this on the way to an interview that was far, like 3 hours away, 3 hours there and back, and I was just like in it. Like, the audiobook is so good. I think that her audiobooks are so good because she has so many characters always, and it's just always a great story. Anyway, this is about Carrie Soto, who is a tennis player, I believe in the 90s. Yeah, late 80s, early 90s. Talks about her upbringing coming from, I'm not even gonna say which country. I know that it is somewhere in Latin America or the Caribbean, but I'm not even going to make the mistake because I just cannot remember. But you know, coming to the United States, learning how to play tennis. Her father was an excellent tennis player in her home country, and you know, just basically following her career, scandals, and retirement, and coming out of retirement. It was very good. I'm pretty sure it must have been, because the way that the story was written was so well, so I'm assuming that I was very deeply connected, which I am, and I was, to her character. And maybe I did not like the way that it ended, or there was a detail that maybe I felt as though should have been more deeply delved into, because I have it as 4 stars, and I'm just assuming I must have not liked the way that it ended, because it was really, really good. And I cannot wait for Taylor Jenkins' next novel. I'm like always on her Instagram, like, can we have a date? Can we have a cover? I would really like to know. The next book that I read was The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. I gave that 4 stars. I really enjoyed that. I thought it was really good. It's a thick little book, but it went by fast. I enjoyed the characters. It is about this like CEO sort of guy, comes from a rich family that owns this like big theme park in Florida called Dreamland or something, Dream World, basically Disney World. And anyway, he is like this agreement with his grandparents or his grandfather to come take over the park for a year, 6 months to a year, and he ends up meeting this girl, and they have a situation, and it's like he's really like the grumpy sunshine kind of thing, even though she's kind of feisty. I'm not gonna lie, it was a little corny. There's nothing wrong with corny, and it was good. I mean, I could see that people like it, and I bought the second one, so that's a series that, you know, it's there. I like read the first page. I didn't finish it. I didn't have any intention to sit down and read it at the time, but I can see myself finishing the series. I enjoyed it. The book that I read, another 5-star for me, was Working Stiff: 2 Years, 262 Bodies in the Making of a Medical Examiner by Dr. Judy Melinek and TJ Mitchell. This is the story of a medical examiner, and I thought it was so interesting. I think I've said this before, but I enjoy reading about healthcare and medicine and everything like that. It was just really, it was good. Like, just learning about the ways that different people have passed away, different accidents, and kind of what happens to the body in different circumstances. I mean, she just delved into, you know, these very like physically like blunt force trauma, people who, you know, people who maybe they were drowned, they were killed. Like, she gets into it. And she also had a stint as she worked in New York City during 9/11, and she talked about that at length. And I thought that it was just a perspective that I personally just, I mean, you think about it, but to see it, to, you know, read it in such detail, I thought it was just super moving, and I enjoyed it. 5 stars for me. The next book that I read was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. It was a 3-star for me. The humor was there. I thought it was funny. It follows this couple, or they're not really a couple, but this guy and this girl, they've been friends since college, and they have been going on different vacations. I think it's like for like 5 or 10 years or something, and then they kind of have like this falling out, and they go again, and I just was like, okay. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that book for me was just really hyped up, but I know I've said it before, even though I like the fine print, so maybe that means that my opinion doesn't matter. But I just sometimes romance, I mean, you really have to care about the characters. For me, I really have to care about both of them, or at least one of them a lot, you know. And I don't know, I really like Emily Henry's writing. Sometimes I feel like the words and the writing is really beautiful, but I wish that the depth was there for the characters, if that makes sense. And that was just for this particular book, because the next book that I read was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I gave that one 4 stars, and I did like that one a lot more. I felt like we got a lot more depth about Nora, and so this, and I'm not gonna like speak for anyone else, but I'm pretty sure that I've heard that it's either Book Lovers or Happy Place. It sounds like it's usually people's favorite. I like this one a lot. It is about Nora. She's like very type A, older sister, holds it down, very responsible. She don't take a break. She doesn't use her PTO. She has the Peloton, she has the class pass, she gets a haircut, you know, she schedules her eyelash fill in advance, she schedules her nails in advance, like when she's leaving, like she's that girl. And she basically like meets this guy that, like, you know, they don't like each other at first, but he lets her come out of her shell, and I thought it was cute and I liked it. 4 stars for me. The next book that I read was Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. This was 3 stars. Honestly, I would even say it was like 2. It was like kind of really corny. It was about this couple who are going to this, like, well, first of all, it was just one of those thrillers that you just absolutely have to suspend your belief. I mean, it was just like to the point where it was like, okay, like, who's doing this? It was about this couple. I believe they lived in the United Kingdom somewhere, and they're like going on this trip in like this very secluded, isolated place. It gets super cold, super snowy, and they are like, the place seems like it's haunted. They don't know where anybody's at, and it's like weird things are happening, and it's just like, I don't know. I just think that, why don't we leave? Like, why don't we leave? And it was always, we can't leave because this and that. And it's just like, we're going to leave. We're gonna figure it out and we're gonna go. And then after that, it just started getting really crazy, like too crazy, where I was like, okay, I'm not enjoying this. The next book that I read that I enjoyed was Everyone Here is Lying by Shari Lapena. This was a 4 star, and I feel like it deserved that 4 star. It was about, and this was something that I was really looking forward to. It's about this family, and they have a daughter who is just, you know, a difficult child, and I think she's either 8 or 10, and she's somewhere she's not supposed to be, and her dad comes home and sees her. I'm just gonna say this because this is all in like the first chapter. Anyway, they get into an argument and he slaps her, and then she runs away, and he's like, doesn't tell anybody that happened. So it just starts off on a lie. I thought it was really good. I gave it 4 stars because I feel like she was way more mature than her years. I just found that difficult to believe, especially as someone who taught specifically that age range. it was between 8 and 12, and it was like even like super gifted. And to be clear, there was something was going on, which I'm not going to get into because I would spoil it, but to me, it was just like, it wasn't giving. I mean, I was just like, I just cannot believe that. But it was still good. The story was good. If she was like 12, we might have been working with something. But like, I think she was like 8. I think she was like 8. The next book that I read was Mr. Salary by Sally Rooney. I gave this 3 stars. I think I was just like maybe like desperate to read something. This is like really short, and towards the end of the year, I will say last year I didn't read that many physical books, and so maybe that's kind of like where just things started to go like poorly. I was listening to a lot of audiobooks in kind of like ebooks, and yeah, I don't know, like it's tough, honestly, like to pay attention. Like with ADHD, it's hard to focus, and I like, if it's not interesting, I'm just not interested in it anyway. So I was reading Mr. Salary. This is short as hell. Like, it's like not even, I mean, I was reading it on an ebook on my phone, and it still felt really short. I gave it 3 stars. I think that it was a good story. It was about, I believe that she's in college. What can I even say? About this girl in college dating this guy. And it was just so short that it just ended abruptly, to the point where I was like, was this not even the real story? I mean, was this a snapshot? But I like Sally Rooney's writing, so I guess I gave it 3 stars. The next book that I read was The Facemaker by Lindsay Fitzharris. This was really interesting. I gave it 3 stars because I thought it was slow. It was a history book about just surgery and like facial reconstruction for World War I or II. This was in the only video I filmed last year, my book haul. And I think I said I want to read this next, and it took me like a month to read it. It's not long, and it's actually quite interesting. And so I almost feel like it's not even fair to rate it 3 stars, because is it really 3 stars, or did you just take so long to read it that you forgot what happened the last time you picked the book up? Anyway, it does follow this surgeon as he kind of builds this team of surgeons in England, I believe. And yeah, it was pretty cool. I enjoyed it. And it jumps around all over the world during World War I and before and after as well. It was good. And I also bought another book that she wrote about like the history of like medicine and stuff like that. I can't remember what it was called, but I think it's about plastic surgery. I'm pretty sure. And I think that would be really interesting as well. The next book that I read was Happy Place by Emily Henry, and I gave that 3 stars. I think the cover is outstanding. I was looking for it at the library with my mom. I listened to this on audio. Probably need to take a step back from audiobooks, I would say, unless I'm driving or it's like nonfiction. I don't know. I felt like this one, it felt long to me. It's about this couple. I feel like everybody's read this and knows the synopsis, but it is about a couple who is separated and did not tell their friends, and they go to like this lake house to celebrate the wedding. Oh, is that a spoiler? To celebrate a friend, and they like are in the same room hanging out because they didn't tell their friends they were broken up. Kind of the same thing. Beautiful writing. I felt like it kind of was glossing over their romance. Like, it was like, you know, we spent summers doing this and falls doing that, and it was beautifully written, but it wasn't deep. Like, I want a story. I want 2, 3, 4 stories. Honestly, I think I'm just probably one of those people where, as much as I say I don't like a series, where it needs to be, I have to have a series, or it needs to be long, or it just has to be really, where you can just really give it to me and it's care. But I really enjoyed the characters. It just was average to me. And I think that I probably rated it harshly because it was like so popular. But still, Book Lovers was my favorite. Emery Henley. The next book that I read was The Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren. It's like a devotional, like a 42-day devotional. If you are spiritual or religious and you're interested in that, I think it would be pretty good. I don't believe I rated it. Yeah, if that's your thing, then you might like it. If you feel maybe a little bit lost or confused, if not, then you probably wouldn't want to read it or pick it up. Anyway, the next book that I listened to, which this audiobook I did really listen to, was Let Me Love You by Alexandria House, the first book of the McLean Brothers series. I gave this 3 stars, although I remember enjoying it, and it's rated highly on Goodreads. This is about a lady who, like, why can I not remember anybody's name? Her name is Jo, and she has this little girl by this guy in the music industry, and he's like sucks, and they get a divorce, and you know, he's like rich. And they lived in this big house that she gets to keep, and she ends up meeting this rapper named Big South, and I think I liked it for probably like 50% of it, and then it just started getting like, I just didn't like it. Like there's just things about it that, like, the characters did, the way they spoke to each other, that it just was no longer romantic to me. I didn't find it to be romantic, and I gave it 3 stars. And I can't even say what it is because it would spoil the book. But it's like, it was several things that I felt were not romantic. Just, I didn't find it to be a romance. The next book that I read was Keep It in the Family by John Mars. 3 stars. It is about a couple who are already like kind of scraping it together, I guess you could say, and they scrape all their coins together to buy this dilapidated house because the father-in-law of this couple is a contractor, and so is the son. That's what they do, and they're trying to fix this house. And as they are fixing it, they find evidence of a crime that occurred decades before. And it just kind of goes from there. The 3 stars is generous. That's what I'll say. This was one of the lowest, and the rating is like 3 stars. I mean, when I think about this, I think 1 star, honestly. And I will explain later. It just wasn't very good, but I don't want to derail it and stop right now. The next book that I read was One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I gave that 4 stars. This was good. This was about a woman who falls in love with this man. Were they high school sweethearts? So they knew each other in high school, and then together they are just very adventurous. They travel and everything like that, and then they get married a year to the date of the marriage. Instead of celebrating their 1-year anniversary, this guy's like, I'm gonna go on a wilderness adventure in Alaska, and I am going to leave on my 1-year wedding anniversary, and then he quote unquote dies and never comes back, except he does, and years later, and she has moved on and remarried another guy from her hometown. And I thought it was good. I thought it was really good. I gave it 4 stars. Yeah, and I think it ended realistically. I do. I enjoyed it. I think, and it's really not that long, so you should read it. Okay, we are nearing the final stretch After that, I read None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I gave this 4 stars. This was really good. I guess things started kind of looking up in the fall because I finished this book on October 7th. This was about a podcast host and her birthday twin. I believe, yeah, her name was Alex, the podcast host, and her birthday twin, Josie Fair. They kind of like meet each other. Well, they do meet each other at a restaurant where they're both celebrating their birthday. They run into each other in the bathroom, and then from there, Josie takes a liking to Alex and positions herself to be around Alex and near her until she can let her know that she wants to be involved in Alex's podcast. And from there, we get to know a lot about Josie and her crazy life. And it was good. Yeah, I don't know, I guess I'm like, if it's so good, why wasn't it 5 stars? I think it just wasn't excellent. Like, it just wasn't like, this was crazy, but it was good. And you should read that as well. And then, because I was on a Lisa Jewell kick, because that's the first book of hers that I've ever read, I read Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell, which I also gave 4 stars and thought was pretty good. It is about this lady, really, who her name is Laurel, and she falls, well, she's like, her daughter Ellie has gone missing years ago, like 10 years ago or something like that, and so her life has been affected by that. I think that her and her husband have gotten a divorce. She's not even, like, she doesn't really talk to her other 2 children. It has, like, deeply affected their life. It's torn her family apart. And she falls in love with this guy named Floyd, and from there it just gets completely crazy. Like, the craziest, probably most, it's not the most horribly graphic thing I've ever read, but it was awful. But it was 4 stars. Like, it was like, is this, I mean, it got to the point where I was like, is this really where we're going? Is this it? But because it was written so well, it was good, but it was awful. It was dark. The next book that I read was What It's Really Like, Outrageous Stories from Teaching Around the Country by Jane Morris. I saw this at half price, and it's just stories and submissions from teachers around the country, like post-pandemic, probably like maybe 6 months pandemic, and it was good. It was good. It talks about really just the good and the bad of being a teacher, and I thought it was really relatable and funny. And it read really quickly because every post or submission is like a page, if that. Then I read The Marriage Act by John Marrs. This is 2 stars, if not 1, and it was bad. I hate to say that because I really love, like, John Marrs as an author, but this year I don't know why his books just didn't hit for me. They just didn't, and this one did not. And for some reason, I thought I had read these closer together. I didn't. I read them about a month and a half apart. This was following several couples and people in a, what's it called when it's like, I guess it's just like futuristic version of London, where basically being married it's a law, like a, wow, it already is a law. I mean, it's lawfully binding, but just the lines between government and just marriage are completely blurred. You know, you can't get a divorce. If you do, it's like this. You have to basically, like, stay married. There's, like, people have, which is just really not far-fetched, and I think that's why there are some details that are, like interesting. Like, you know, you have to have something in your home that's recording your marriage, and you have people who, you know, a marriage counselor who knows, like, everything about your marriage and everything like that. And you know, all of these things you could say do exist in our society today. Of course, this is a thriller, and there is a group of people who are completely against it. You know, they believe in autonomy. The government should not be involved in your marriage at all. and you know, it's kind of just like this big corporate thing, and all of that sounds like, you know, it could be an interesting story. It's just the story itself, it just didn't deliver based on the premise. I think it could have been so much better, and I'm going to talk about why, because it's in my bottom 2 books of the year, and I will talk about that later, because there's only a few more books left. The next book that I read was The School for Good Mothers by Jasmine Chan. I rated this 4 stars. I remember when I hauled this book in 2022, and I was like, oh my god, her name is like similar to mine. Her name is Jasmine, just like mine. I thought it was pronounced Jessamine, but it's literally Jasmine. Like, when I listened to this on audiobook, and when the audiobook finished, they were like, a novel written by Jasmine Chan. I was like, oh my god. Good. It was very good. I thought it was really interesting. It is about a mother named, what's her name? Frida, who, and I've heard about this book, I'll say that, but it is about a mother named Frida. She kind of, I don't want to say she has an accident, because it wasn't an accident, it was a choice, but she makes a choice to, you know, in her state of overwhelm, to place or have her child in a precarious situation. I've watched reviews where this kind of, where it gets, you know, kind of fuzzy, where it's like, was she wrong or not? Was what she did was wrong? Because if it is, then it feels like what happens following was, you know, written for, you know, fiction, but also, where is there sympathy there? I think that through the book, that's where the sympathy is garnered. Do I think that what she did was wrong in the beginning? It's like, you know, talking in circles. Yes, but I also believe that throughout the book, and as we learned about her, we could understand that, you know, she was struggling. And I think that to me was, I felt like an even deeper part of the book in itself was that the way that we as a society treat women who are struggling with motherhood, and was the anecdote to that, was it helpful or not? At the end of the book, I felt like it wasn't. and I gave it 4 stars, and I thought it was good. And but what I really think would be, if you're a mother or if you have raised children, what is your opinion? Because I just thought it was good. I didn't feel like it was good or bad. It's just one of those places where it's just a very difficult conversation to have. And then the next 2 books, honestly, after that, just everything fell to the floor. I read Two Nurses Smoking by David Means. I gave that 2 stars. This was a short story collection that I thought was gonna be something different. It is about, basically all the stories surround loss in some way. And I just remember wanting it to be over. So to me, that just means it can't be that good. It just has to be a lower rating if I'm literally like, when does it end? So that was that for me. And then the last book that I read was The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I gave that 3 stars. The TikTok hype got to me. I know this is a classic, so I don't want anybody to be offended by that, but I did read it because I saw that it was trending on TikTok. Maybe I am not just, well, I'll say that I don't read really a lot of classic novels in general. I think that I was just expecting to be like mind blown or something like that. I believe that it is what it sets out to be, and I get it. Like, yes. It is about a woman who is, it's kind of hard. I'm just gonna spoil this one because it's so short, but it is a woman who is going through postpartum psychosis, and Maybe that is why I didn't rate it as highly, because I think that it had already been spoiled for me on TikTok, so I'm kind of doing the same thing. I'm sorry if you haven't read it. And because I knew that, I felt like I knew it already. But what I think is more profound is the way that she was treated by those around her as she was going through this. And I kind of like the School for Good Mothers. It's just like, as women are suffering, you know, or having a mental health crisis, to be able to get the help that you need, it seems to be difficult. So that was the last book I read in 2023. That was the 33rd book that I read this year, and it was not my best reading year. Gonna try and be better, gonna try and do better next year. Right, so now I'm gonna do my top 3 and my bottom 2. My top 3 was Fly Girl by Ann Hood. I kind of spoke about that a little bit already, but it just details the journey to becoming a flight attendant, being a flight attendant, switching different airlines as airlines merged, as they closed down altogether, specifically in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and I just thought it was super cool. Something that I read and really enjoyed before I went to flight attendant training last year, and honestly something that I would probably read again. And it's all of my top 3 were nonfiction. So the next book was Working Stiff by Dr. Judy Melinek. Like I said, it was just really good, very interesting, just kept me on my toes. Felt like I read it really quickly, was just really interested in learning about the human body and hearing all the terminology and the things that happened. And yeah, I just think that that's interesting. Maybe one day I'll go to nursing school. I'm sure I've said that before on this channel. And then my number 1 book of the year was Know My Name by Chanel Miller. It was so good, so good. I know I already spoke about it in depth when I was reading the books in order, but it was just genuinely amazing. I think that anybody should read it. Anybody should read it. It was incredible. Without saying too much. Bottom 2, and I'm gonna go in because I said I would, and I'm going to. My bottom 2. Number 1, Keep It in the Family by John Mars. It was just like, the word that comes to my mind is bad. I'm so sorry. I feel like it's so mean. You could just tell that that book had been written over, it just felt as though could have been finished, I kid you not, at probably 4 times. And it seemed as though he picked it up again to continue, if that makes sense. Like, it was perfectly said and finished, I would say 100 pages before it finished. And you could tell that it was like a revision. At that point, the integrity of the story had just completely fell apart to me. It doesn't even matter the first 300 pages, because the last 100 pages don't make sense. I mean, they're just like, just fit in there. The reason I say this is because the story was written, dated to be in like 2018, 2017 or something. And you could tell that he was revising it after COVID. I just think that if it didn't happen before, like if it didn't happen during COVID or after, we don't even have to talk about it. Like, we don't even have to include it. And he did. And I just didn't think it was necessary. And it quite frankly ruined the story. So that was just the bottom. And then my second, and this is in no order, although I do think that I didn't like that one the most, was The Marriage Act by John Mars. It's awful that, and I love John Mars. I mean, there was a time where he was like my most anticipated, thriller writer. So like I kind of explained a little bit earlier when I introduced the book, or when I had said that I had read it earlier, this was about this advanced society where the lines between like law and marriage were highly blurred, and we were following several couples and just people in general who were impacted by this. And I think that there was two main people who were completely unrelated that we were following in depth, and then there was probably like 6 people who were just loosely following. And I just think that it just got completely messy and blurred. I think that it started not making sense at all. Like halfway through the story, we just completely stopped talking about certain people, didn't know what happened to them, and it was just a big mess. I think it just really missed the mark. It could have been really interesting. To me, it turned just into this, like, it just, I mean, I think it would have been a really good psychological thriller. It just seemed to turn into just this standard, like, I don't want to spoil it, but it just completely lost all of that. And it just sort of turned into something that just didn't make any sense. And for that, I had to give it 2 stars. And those were my least favorite. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again in another video. Bye.